Hey everybody, welcome back. Music Corner, as always, host Hunter Schafer Prada collab, the internet's sleepiest music girl. It's nearly 2 a.m. And as is the case, that means it is so nearly March, 2 months of ye old 2020 in the books. And as the ancient gods hath foretold, that means that it is time for me to recap you guys on some of the best, some of the worst, and some of the most popular albums that I reviewed over on the Music Corner blog so far in 2022. As always, link in the description to the blog. You can read the full reviews, the full written reviews for all the records I'm going to talk about today, as well as a number of others that did not make the cut onto this recap. And as always with this bit, we are going to lead off with some of the more popular, some of the more talked about albums of the past 2 months that I maybe didn't have extremely strong negative or positive feelings towards. The first of which, one of the most talked about albums of the year so far in the sad girl scene, Mitski with Laurel Hell. I was iffy going into this thing because I really disliked the lead single. I think it's one of her worst songs to date, but every single after that I actually thought was pretty good and increasingly better in some ways. So going into this album I was hesitant, but I think ultimately it has a lot of the same positives and negatives of her last record. A number of these songs are just flat out not finished. They are not full songs. They end out of nowhere. The parts have nothing to do with each other, but when Mitski does manage to put a coherent song together, which she does on about half of this album, it's generally really good. She takes her sound in a exciting and dramatic synth-pop direction. I think her fans will and have already been eating this thing up, and I thought it was alright. FKA Twigs also delivered us a new mixtape, Capri Songs, and she was very clear in the promotional campaign and the lead up to this project. This was strictly a mixtape. This was not her third album. I wouldn't even call it on the same level as some of her more flourished EPs. This is just strictly a mixtape, and yeah, it's just a mixtape. There are some great things, there are some not so great things, but ultimately her talent as a vocalist, as a songwriter, and as a musical conceptualizer shines through here more than it doesn't. Another one that I had some weird feelings about, Corday with From a Bird's Eye View, on the back of his great 2019 debut album and a pretty good EP he released last year. My expectations for this thing were pretty high, and they were not met. But in another sense, I feel like Corday didn't even try to meet them on this record. He really shifts his approach. Sonically, he gets a lot more contemporary and a lot more mainstream in his beat and feature choices. And it just seems like, while he's obviously good at this and better than a lot of his contemporaries are doing at this, he's selling himself short. Pine Grove just dropped a new album, 1111, and it's a Pine Grove album. It's about as consistent as all of the other ones, which is to say, not extremely. I think it's better than their last one, even though it doesn't have quite as many amazing high points. There's also not as many duds and low points on this thing. I think it is a decent, incredibly listenable, and accessible indie folk record that a lot of people will find something to grab onto about, and I certainly did, at least for a handful of songs. Also Saba with the new Saba record, another one that before this new era started I was highly anticipating, although I heard a few singles that I wasn't crazy about. I heard a few singles that I was crazy about, so I really had no idea what to expect going into this project. And yeah, this thing is a weird combination of tracks where Saba is taking a really bold, artistic risk, and occasionally it pulls off, occasionally it doesn't. Some of the singing on here is a little bit rough, but also there's tracks here that just feel like they're below Saba's ambition and his pin game, and they kind of stand out among these greater experiments. I think if this tracklist had been trimmed down a little bit of some of those more obviously mediocre cuts, he could have put out a at least more consistent record, but still the highlights do shine through quite a bit on this project. This new Krallice album, technical black metal band, what I believe to be one of the more respected and praised within the genre, and yeah, this album's pretty good. It's not my favorite thing I've ever heard them done. It's not quite as mind-melting as what I think a lot of people would call some of their best and most essential work, but it is pretty good, and I would be surprised if I hear much of any black metal this year that I like more than this. To pivot in another direction, the new Spoon album, a surprise to no one that this thing is good. Spoon has always been good, and it seems like they always will be good. Just writing those Spoon songs, those rock songs, they do it here. And then they're still spooning all these years, and they're still spooning, and I love it. The new Foxtails album, Fawn, an early screamo highlight of 2022. I've had an awareness of this band for quite a while, but I saw some publications, particularly Brooklyn Vegan, really pushing this new record, talking about how good it was. I decided to give it a chance, reviewed it, really enjoyed it, a lot of great stuff here, and I recommend it even if it may not be purely what you're anticipating hearing going into a screamo record. And in the most embarrassing review I've written so far this year, if not in my entire career, I had to translate personal feelings about Kim Petras' Slut Pop EP into some kind of critical and cohesive analysis. Yes, this thing is about a badass trans pop star reclaiming her sexuality over a series of extremely raunchy tunes with these pulsating club beats. I think it's pretty good, actually. I know that recipe may not be for everyone, but it was for me, obviously. I'm further embarrassing myself. One day all of this will be dug up and somehow used to harm me in the future. The point is, personal connections aside, I liked this thing. I thought it was good. It's, obviously very immediate, very surface level. It is exactly what you are expecting it to be, and all I can do is say I'm glad that it delivered that. Now, an album that I cannot believe has not been bigger is The Weeknd with Dawn FM. I think the fact that this thing is kind of a weird, spacey concept album, combined with the fact that hits from After Hours have been on the radio pretty much non-stop all the way up to when this era started, may have worn people out of the Weeknd sound and his style, but this is a pretty good record. Obviously, it's extremely sonically cohesive. I like some of the thematic mystique that Abel weaves into these tracks. It's not his best collection of songs ever, but it's pretty good. And come year end, I think it'll be a record that I am continuing to really enjoy. As usual, there weren't a whole ton of albums that I reviewed that really made my tummy hurt, but these four made my tummy hurt. We'll start with the worst and get better. This new Gunna album, I thought when the last Gunna album came out that it was his best project yet. And I'm pretty sure I gave it a 5 out of 10, which should tell you where I am in the Gunna critical chronology. And I was just hoping he would improve, not like I was expecting him to make this concept album or change up his style or flows much ever, or his beat choices. All I really was expecting him to do was hone the very, very specific, the very, very narrow sound in which he occupied, and he did not fucking do that. This album is worse than Gunna. It's worse lyrically, the beats are worse, everything about it's just a step back, and for how long it's been since Wanna, which is way longer than a lot of artists like this would wait to release a follow-up project. It just feels like there was no work put into this, and if not for the fucking P emoji, if not for pushing P, would anyone still even remember that this album existed, even though it's not even 2 months old? I was similarly let down by the Wombats, their new album, a band that I think a lot of people would describe as a guilty pleasure. I'm not guilty about liking the Wombats. They are a straightforward, enjoyable pop rock, pop punk band. I thought their last album was their best since their debut. I was hoping for them to continue on that upward trajectory. Instead, they crashed and burned and made perhaps the most embarrassing and shallow and lyrically painful album of their entire career. Like, for people who get online and rage about Lana Del Rey or the 1975 lyrics not being, I don't know, Elliott Smith or whatever, this Wombats album is a lyrical nightmare. And it's not just that the lyrics are stupid, which, believe me, they're fucking stupid, but it often doesn't even make any sense. It often doesn't come together into a song that makes sense cohesively and coherently. And with all of those glaringly obvious issues, the instrumentals on this thing, the hooks on this thing, are not making up for any of it. The hooks on this record are bad. They're just not good throughout. Like, there are just so many duds. I don't know what to say. Something happened to the Wombats from... With their last record, the very, very least you could expect was good hooks, lyrics that didn't make you think too much, a simple formula executed well, and they have just fumbled almost every single element of that on this record. I was not crazy about the new Your Old Droog and the God Fahim collaborative album, which I was anticipating enjoying because it's a sequel to a project that I liked quite a bit last year, and I ended up really enjoying Your Old Droog's Time record that came out last year, but this thing is just so half-assed, so short. All of the songs are just one note, you get it, the gist of it, there's a verse, maybe two, and it's out. And it's like underwhelming. It doesn't go on for long enough for me to really call it taxing, but like there's just not much here to grab onto aside from the occasional great lyric or really compelling flow. And as much as it pains me to say it, I wasn't crazy about this new Alt-J album. I've always liked their music more than the general critical consensus. Some of the eccentricities that the band has had in the past have made them a little bit of a critical punching bag if you look in the right places, but I've stuck up for them over the years, even though I think they're on a continually declining path, and this is the furthest that they've declined so far. This album just feels like a monolith in terms of, even though it's not that long, I don't even think it's an hour long, the listening experience is long. It's way longer than the album because some of these songs just trudge along, and after a pretty good first half and a generally consistent start to the record, the second half is such a difficult slog that just sticks the album right in the mud and does not let it go. Okay, no more tummy aches. Only good albums from now on. The best of the best, my favorite stuff that I've reviewed in the last 2 months, got started early with this new Earl Sweatshirt album, Sick. Yeah, I think this thing has received some backlash from people because his last record was so transcendent for hip-hop, so strikingly original and so impressive. And while this thing is obviously not some rap songs, a lot of what made some rap songs good from Earl's perspective shows up here. He is still on top of his game with lyrics, with these very reserved flows, and with his direct, often monotone demeanor, but he is back onto some livelier and brighter instrumentals this time around. Once again, the record is pretty short, but I have to say that I like a lot of the beats here. I like most of the features, and I just generally find myself impressed by most of these songs. I continue to see Earl as one of the more interesting MCs in this lane right now. Just a few days ago, I finally got to digest and fully publish my review of the new Beach House album, Once Twice Melody, which has been released in parts over the past, 6 months or so. And now that it's finally here, yes, this thing is huge, and yes, there are some songs that I could maybe do without, but for the most part, their sound is still so refreshing, still so fun, despite what I think some people would consider a limited scope. They're doing some amazing, huge things that I just find extremely impressive. The melodies on here, the way that the instrumentation is composed and reserved until just the right moments, make for so many memorable, wonderful hooks and crescendos. I just find myself enjoying so much of this album and listening to it over and over and over again, and it just hits. It's another Beach House album, and it's good again. I was also really, really satisfied with the new Animal Collective album, Time Skiffs. Like, this is their best project since Merriweather Post Pavilion, easily. And I would even say it goes toe-to-toe with some of my favorite records that they've released as solo artists since then, from Deacon and Panda Bear. Like, this is just good. It's their exotic and psychedelic and wandering compositional style. The vocals on here are great. Like, yes, there is one objectively terrible song in the mix that I think a lot of people have been rationalizing over the past month or so since this came out. But everything else is good to excellent and fantastic, and I think I'm going to be keeping a handful of these songs in my rotation for pretty much the rest of the year, which is great. It feels great to see all of these obviously talented guys come together and make a really good project once again. But of course, you likely knew this was coming. The crown jewel I dropped a few weeks ago for just the 8th time in all of the years that I've been doing this, writing reviews for albums. A 10 out of 10 review, a perfect 10, like I gave last year to my album of the year, The Little Sims Project. But early on this year, we had something spectacular. One of the most spectacular records I've ever reviewed in the entire time that I've been doing this. Black Country New Road with Ants From Up There. I don't even know where to start with this thing. It's fucking amazing. It is so good. Isaac Wood's storytelling and lyricism and style and vocal delivery is just perfect for these songs of neurotic loneliness and anguish. The vivid way that he expresses himself all across this album is just remarkable. It is so intoxicating, and the way that all of these songs come together to paint and to reinforce that overall consensus, that overall emotional tone and style that it's meant to convey is remarkable. But even to just stop short at the most forward and obviously brilliant thing about the project is selling it short, because the instrumentation on here is absolutely immaculate, and the compositions, the way they wander, the way they wait for the right moments to pull you back in, the way they consistently subvert your expectations, everything that the band does on this project is just insanely innovative and compelling in every way. I just can't say enough about how good I think every single aspect of this is. And once again, like I said repeatedly in my review, all I really want to come out of this is for Isaac Wood to be okay, because what he's left us with here is brilliant and more than enough to last Black Country New Road fans, me included, until the end of time. So I have no gripes with his ability to focus on himself. In fact, I wish him the best of luck in every single possible way, because this is enough. What he's done here is a one-way ticket to just being okay forever. So that's that. Update Reno. In the background for the past, 3 months, maybe 4, I've been slowly pinning together my 10-year retrospective lists. For 2012, I've been pouring over about 140 or so albums from 2012 to try and pin down my top 50 albums list, which is coming in March, and working to assemble my top 50 songs list, which is coming later this year in September. That'll probably be the next thing I upload. Still a lot of work to be done, so if I disappear for a few weeks, that's what I'm doing. In the meantime, tell me about your favorite records of the year so far. Tell me what I should be reviewing just this weekend. A bunch of great new stuff came out from Tears for Fears and Conway the Machine and Earth Gang, projects I'm probably going to review sometime in early March. And what have I missed? I have a long list of stuff that I've been meaning to review that I'll do rapid fire reviews for. Let me know what you guys have been listening to, what's been good. And that's it. And that is all said and done. And it is time, well beyond time, for me to go the hell to sleep.